basically does everything. You see him at the Derby. You see him at many golf events. I really like this gentleman. I think he's a great storyteller. I know him a little bit. I know he's a good guy as well. And his name is Tom Rinaldi from ESPN. Tom, Tiki, and Tierney, how you been, buddy? What's happening?
E.T., great to hear your voice and to be with you too as well, Tiki.
My pleasure. I didn't know about this the Red Bandana game. This book that you that's coming out on when is it? Is it out already? The book?
It is. It came out September 6th. We made the Times bestseller list.
Oh,
first
congrats!
couple of weeks out, so
Wow.
we feel good about it.
Yeah, I didn't know this story. Tell us a little bit about it.
So the Red Bandana tells the story of a young man, 24 years old, Wells Crowther, was an athlete at Boston College, played lacrosse, was a volunteer firefighter as well growing up. And on the morning of 9/11 was working for an investment firm, Sandler O'Neill, on the 104th floor of the South Tower. It tells the story of his heroism that day, but also the development of his character prior to that day, and then sort of the natural spread of his legacy, making his way down from the 104th floor after the second plane hit. He came to the 78th floor, the Sky Lobby, which was a transfer point between express elevators from the ground floor and elevators going to the highest floors on the tower. And he encountered just a terrible scene of up to 200 people dead and dying. He carried one woman across his back down nearly 20 flights of stairs while leading a group. He then implored them to go on and went back up. He led a second group into the stairwell towards safety. He ultimately made his way down to the lobby and did not leave. He went instead to the command post set up by the FDNY. And when his remains were found months later, they were recovered surrounded by about a dozen FDNY firefighters and him, a civilian, Wells Crowther. The Red Bandana is the clue that was used to find his identity. Guys, you know there were countless acts of heroism performed that day. But Crowther had been using a red bandana to cover his nose and mouth from the fire and the smoke on the 78th floor. And it was something given to him by his dad when he was just 7 years old on the way to church. And when his parents heard the accounts of survivors months later talking about this man emerging out of the smoke to help lead them to safety with a red bandana, that's sort of the third act of the book and their efforts in a detective story, if you will, to find out whether this was in fact their son, and it was.
Gee, I mean, trying to make us cry here, Tom. I mean,
Wow.
how did you get past how'd you get past the first chapter? I mean, this
That's amazing.
young man sounds like a saint.
He's not, and I think that's one of the things that hopefully people find resonance in. That he was not a saint. He was a good athlete, good enough to play Division I lacrosse at Boston College. He was an excellent student.
Yep.
But he was a kid who was small initially, who got picked on and bullied a little bit. He was a guy that got into a brawl in college where he broke his hand beating up another bully who he felt was harassing fellow freshmen. He was far from perfect. And the book really traces, again, where a hero, if you will, comes from, how one is made. Because I think we all ask ourselves, you guys know from city life in New York City, I live right outside in Jersey, that terror is real right now in our country. And what would we do in that moment? This is a story of what one man chose to do, not once, but twice.
That's phenomenal. Talking to Tom Rinaldi, of course, many great years with ESPN, and he's still there. He's got a new book out called The Red Bandana. You just heard Tom describe the contents of the book. Tom, I want to ask a couple questions about the game now. Obviously, you're a big you're everywhere. I mean, I think the last time I saw you, if it wasn't on a boat at a party, and I know that sounds a little highfalutin. I'm not trying to sound that way. It may have been at the Derby, or it may have been at Belmont. I mean, it's been a while, but you're everywhere, man. You're on the golf courses. You're at races. You're at college football. What do you enjoy covering the most? I don't know that I've ever asked you that. I think you're very good at everything because you tell really poignant stories, and you somehow have the amazing ability to always connect to people's soul. And I don't know that everybody has that gift. I think you do that very well. But what do you enjoy covering the most?
That is so kind. Let me go back to the last time we saw each other was the Belmont.
Okay.
And, Tiki, I don't know if you've ever been at a Belmont where the Triple Crown is at stake and it
No.
doesn't happen. I think with BT as my witness, it's maybe the only sporting event where, other than the connections to the other horses in the field, where there are 80, 90, 100,000 people all rooting for the same thing.
Yeah, that's
There's
true.
virtually
That's
no
true.
one who is rooting against history, and when it doesn't happen, it is singularly deflating. Isn't it,
Hey,
BT, would you
Tom,
say?
remember how hot it was that day?
Oh,
Oh, dude. You want? Oh, how about this? A quick aside. So Jen and I, we weren't even married yet. It was right before, right before we got married. And Jen had, my wife is from Texas. Obviously, Tiki knows that. Tom knows that. Most of the audience does as well. But right before we met, she had bought a little tiny Lexus, and I had an SUV. So we were taking the Lexus. It was a little nicer, shinier, and we're taking the Lexus from Hoboken, New Jersey, to the Belmont. Like an idiot, Tom, I left my keys on, I don't know how, this is a true story, on top of the Lexus sunroof, okay? And when we got to Belmont, the keys were still there.
Wow.
I don't know how the hell that happened. The keys were still there. I got something for you, Tom. We had Jim Harbaugh on the show the other day, right? And I think that Jim, for a multitude of reasons, number one, he's quirky and unpredictable and incredibly passionate, as you know. I think he's the most interesting person in sport for me. Doing what you do and all the conversations that you've had a chance to have over the years, if you can sit down with one sports figure now and you don't get the filtered, nonsensical, predictable rhetoric, but they would legitimately answer your questions in a poignant, truthful manner, who would you choose to interview? Who would your subject be?
it's got to be Tiger. I mean, it's got to be Tiger. I think he remains a perennial fascination. For it, obviously, I'm biased. I cover golf. But first of all, let me give you guys huge kudos. It's not easy to get a spot with Jim Harbaugh. That's
Yeah.
very well done.
That's what
I
we
don't
do
know,
here, Tommy.
Whoever managed it, whoever engineered it, that's very well done.
That's how we roll. Appreciate it, Tommy.
We'll give kudos to Samter.
That's our producer.
Just briefly. But the
He's
truth,
annoying,
well
but he's
done.
good.
but the truth is, we had
but-
him at the Super Bowl, and he liked us at the Super Bowl, so he keeps coming back.
We planted the seed. Santa didn't really have to work for this one, Tom.
Well,
But go
I
ahead.
can tell you, back to your question there, not just Tiger. I mean, there are so many. I find Saban fascinating in college football. I find Rafa maybe the most compelling athlete in all of sport because I cover tennis. He's a tremendous guy to talk with, a very honest guy, very, very heartfelt. No matter how many times you interview him, he's the guy that walks in the room. I think Tiki was very much the same way. You go into a room and you have done countless interviews in your career. He still shakes every single person's hand. He knows the crew's name. He's remarkable. But there's an endless list. I think because at the end of the day, two things are most compelling to me to cover: greatness and the line between living and dying. Fortunately, the latter is not all I do, but I do a lot of stories that do explore that line. The Red Bandana certainly does, probably to a deeper degree than any story I've ever told. But greatness is compelling in nearly every way. Well, I mean, from Serena to Usain Bolt to LeBron to Coach K to Saban to Jeter to Kobe to all the people I've had, an opportunity to Tierney, Tiki, all the people I've had an opportunity to sit down with. It's such a lottery-winning gig.
Yeah,
It
no,
just is.
no,
It's
Tom.
awesome.
This is I don't want to get too deep into this, but I think you bring up an interesting point when you talk about greatness, and most of those are in sports, obviously. Even though there's greatness outside of sports, but we're a sports show here, and how it's crossing into these social issues that are talking about life and death. It's kind of an extension of life and death. How do you view this? What's happening in our sports society right now with society? Because I don't know if we've seen it since the civil rights era, the '60s and the '70s.
I don't think we have, Tiki. I think that's an absolute fair and accurate assessment. I've done a number of interviews about the book, and to bring up Wells for just one more time, I think one of the reasons that the story has resonated, and this goes to our atmosphere and culture right now, our climate socially, there's such division and discord. And if we go back to the aftermath of the terrorist attacks, there was great unity in our country.
Yep.
You know that,
Yep.
Tiki.
Yep.
And I think that to a degree, it's amazing to consider how distant that feels, almost as if it's irretrievable. And I think one of the ways to recovery certainly is not ignorance and silence. It's engagement and conversation. And there aren't going to be people who agree with all the steps taken. But I think we can all agree that there is great division and there is tragedy right now, and that athletes have a platform and a venue. Again, Tiki, I think you're someone who understood that in your career. You
Yeah.
understand it now. You have a venue now. And there are a lot of athletes who just won't engage in that venue and in that way for their own reasons, whether it's their own fears or simply not wanting to be controversial. But there are more and more who are emboldened to do so. And I think conversation, engagement, reflection, all of those things have to be positive, because judgment grows in silence and distance, and so does ignorance.
Yeah.
Once
Well
again,
said.
I was going to say, once again, painting a very vivid picture with those crisp, poignant words. Tom, you know I love you, man. Tom Rinaldi from ESPN. Name of the book is called The Red Bandana. It's already out. It's already shooting up the New York Times bestseller list. And not surprisingly, you got a chance to hear Tom there. His words are very much the same. So good catching up, buddy. And let's not wait another 5 years before we go watch a horse race, all right?
Thanks so much for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.